Here's everything you might have missed in Black Widow. The biggest poser in the Marvel Cinematic Universe finally has her own movie, and if you've seen Black Widow, you know that's a good thing. Well, maybe not according to Yelena, but you get my drift. Set between the events of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War, Black Widow puts Natasha Romanoff in the spotlight, with a story about fractured families, coming to terms with your past, and near constant mid-air mayhem. There is so much falling in this movie. It's a fitting swan song for Natasha Romanoff that answers some burning questions about the character and shines a light on who she was before she joined Earth's mightiest heroes. While we broke down the film's ending and post-credit scene for you in yesterday's video, today we're going to be looking at all of the Easter eggs, hidden details, and other references you might have missed. Now, obviously, to talk about this in detail, we need to spoil what happens in Black Widow. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, make sure to leave now before this blows up in your face. Okay, let's get into it, shall we? So the film opens on an idyllic afternoon in Ohio 1995, where we see a blue-haired Natasha Romanoff sharing a carefree afternoon with her sister, Yelena. And as we'll see later in the film, Natasha's been dyeing her hair for a long time, mostly to outrun people trying to track her down. More importantly, 1995 was a brutal year in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially for young women. As we've learned in Captain America the Winter Soldier, 1995 was the year that Alexander Pierce's daughter was kidnapped, later to be rescued by Nick Fury. It was also the year that Thanos systematically murdered half of Gamora's people before adopting her. Weird. And it was also the year that Ant-Man and the Wasp villain Ghost, aka Ava Starr, was inundated with quantum energy after her parents were killed in a quantum tunnel experiment gone awry. And last but not least, Captain Marvel also takes place in 1995, during which time Kree agents were hunting down Skrulls hiding in our midst. And while young Monica Rambeau did make a Skrull friend, her mom and Carol Danvers flew off-world to help save the day. And then years later in WandaVision, it seems like Monica has some deeply entrenched bitterness towards Carol, which might be connected to those events. Either way, 1995, bad year. Back in Ohio, things are about to take a turn for the tragic. Much like Wanda Maximoff and the Vision are an unusual couple, this is an unusual family. Rachel Weisz plays their mother, Melina Vostokov, a character in the comics better known as Iron Maiden, a longtime Black Widow rival. And David Harbour plays their father, Alexei Shostakov, aka Red Guardian, the Soviet Union's answer to Captain America. A version of Red Guardian was part of the Soviet superhero squad, the Winter Guard, which was Russia's version of the Avengers, who were recruited largely from Soviet super soldiers developed during the Cold War. We also get two slick references to other members of the Winter Guard later in the film. During Alexei's arm wrestling scene, the large bearded man he defeats is named Ursa, a reference to Ursa Major, a mutant with the ability to transform into a massive brown bear. Alexei even jokingly calls him a big bear after breaking his wrist, which is a move. The second reference is when Yelena calls Alexei Crimson Dynamo later on at dinner, which is actually a separate character in the comics. He was a power armor wearing villain who has nearly 10 iterations over the years, debuting way back in Tales of Suspense number 46. Now, unfortunately, I wouldn't expect to see the Winter Guard on the big screen anytime soon, but mostly this is my attempt at reverse psychology to trick Kevin Feige into actually doing it. So, we'll see if it works, but probably not. Anyway, much like the undercover spy family of the Americans and the real-life deep-cover Russian agents that did the same thing during the Cold War, this family unit itself is living under false identities in Ohio. They're running a covert operation to infiltrate the North Institute. In the comics, the North Institute first appeared in Black Widow Volume 3 Number 1 as a lab operated as a front for the Gynecon biotech firm. And they were targeting Natasha and other Black Widows trained by the Red Room because they purchased old Red Room technology. In the MCU, it's a SHIELD facility that was secretly operated by Hydra during that time period, and that's why SHIELD agents rather than police are the ones who chase the family to the airstrip. The tension is both highlighted and undercut by Yelena's favorite song, Don McLean's American Pie. It's both about the tragic plane crash that killed the Big Bopper, Buddy Holly, and Richie Valens, aka The Day the Music Died, and it's also about the larger cultural shifts and societal disillusionment that came with the transition from the 1950s to the 1960s. And here, it's fitting because the family's suburban life is about to be cruelly ripped away from them, their last semblance of normalcy gone forever. In Cuba, they meet up with General Dreykov, a high-ranked Soviet official and the master of the Red Room. The Red Room is the brutal training facility that transforms young women into deadly assassins as part of their Black Widow program. Basically, Dreykov wanted Hydra's mind control technology from the North Institute that they would later use in their Winter Soldier program to adapt for the Biochip technology that they will later use to control the Widows inside the Red Room. It also seems like a riff on the real-life MK Ultra experiments conducted by the CIA, which involved the quest to develop real-life mind control techniques. And while this is the first time we've seen Dreykov in the MCU, he was actually mentioned back in Avengers during Natasha's interrogation scene with Loki. When Natasha mentions wanting to wipe out the red in her ledger, a major theme in this film, Loki mentions Dreykov's daughter by name. As we learn in Black Widow, the red in Natasha's ledger was also a direct result of what happened in Budapest between her and Hawkeye. It's another event that was first referenced in that movie. Natasha and Clint bombed a building to assassinate Dreykov, and unfortunately his daughter was caught in the blast as collateral damage. Believing both to be dead, Natasha and Clint hid out in a subway station for days on end before things cooled down and they could make their escape. Here, though, Natasha learned that neither Dreykov nor his daughter actually died. The former continued to run the Red Room, and the latter acts as his biochip-controlled kid assassin, better known as Taskmaster. As we'll see, this is a very different version of Taskmaster from the comics, who in those pages is a wisecracking mercenary named Tony Masters, gifted with photographic reflexes. Here, though, she is Antonia Dreykov, an elite mercenary that's quiet as a mouse until the film's final moments. And although we see Taskmaster watching footage of the Avengers fighting at the German airport in Civil War, she actually has their movesets uploaded directly to her brain by another Widow. It's explained that she can be programmed to replicate any move via that chip in her head, rather than having the innate ability like Tony Masters does in the comics. The opening credits have several Easter eggs as well, including General Dreykov featured with various world leaders and politicians over the years like Bill Clinton, Condoleezza Rice, Vladimir Putin, and Jimmy Carter, just to name a few. We also see news broadcasts from WHIH, the MCU's in-universe news network, that's popped up in Iron Man 2, WandaVision, and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We see flashbacks of Yelena and Natasha being separated, then taken to the Red Room to be molded into deadly assassins. There's also inserts of Dreykov's ring, family photos, and pigs, all of which foreshadow major plot points to come later in the movie. 21 years later, we catch up with Natasha in the wake of Civil War on the run from General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, who informs us that she violated the Sokovia Accords for assaulting the King of Wakanda. The Sokovia Accords were signed during Captain America's Civil War to help regulate superhuman activities. Here, Ross is referencing where Natasha broke ranks with Tony Stark and the reigning King of Wakanda, Black Panther, to help Captain America and his team escape capture. Ross also mentions that he has Clint Barton, Sam Wilson, and Scott Lang, the incredible shrinking convict, in custody while Steve Rogers is in the wind. As we'll see during the final moments of the movie, though, Natasha aims to do something about that very problem and will help spring her pals from their confinement on the Raft, the floating prison for high-risk superpowered individuals. While on a mission in Morocco, we see Yelena pull off a familiar move. She drops her knife to her offhand to get the drop on her opponent, Oksana, and that's a move we saw previously in Captain America the Winter Soldier. Natasha also uses that move later on in her fight against Taskmaster as well, so I don't know, maybe Hydra in the Red Room swapped some training notes, or maybe just looks cool as hell. Likewise, Oksana herself could be a subtle reference to Oksana Bolashenko, a woman from Black Widow's past that trained her as a ballerina before she became a super spy in Solo Avengers number 7. Hiding out in Norway, Natasha meets her fixer, Rick Mason, as played by O.T. Fagbenley. First appearing in 1989's Marvel graphic novel Rick Mason the Agent, Mason is a mercenary that specializes in taking down and capturing superhumans. He's the son of Phineas Mason, a Spider-Man villain better known as the Tinker that we've seen in the MCU previously in Spider-Man Homecoming, but here probably bears no relation. Mason gives Natasha a fake ID with the name Fanny Longbottom, and then later during the post-credit scene, Yelena gets an unexpected visit from Valentina Allegra de Fontaine with a mission to murder Hawkeye, presumably in his upcoming Disney Plus show. A smaller detail, though, is that Yelena has a dog with her named Fanny, and that's a subtle way of keeping her sister's memory alive. We see a box of blonde hair dye which Natasha uses by the film's end to cue up her signature look for Avengers Infinity War, and Natasha then unwinds by watching Moonraker, a deeply silly James Bond movie that bears some thematic similarities to this film. They both follow secret agents taking out villains with private armies that hide out in floating fortresses. In Moonraker, they're high up in outer space. In Black Widow, they're just extremely high up in the sky. But the similarities are too close to ignore here. Now, during Natasha's fight with Taskmaster on the bridge, we get our best look at how this biochip works. It helps old Tasky to identify pressure points, predict the likelihood of certain attacks, and monitor threat levels while beaming the visuals back to Dreykov in the Red Room. In addition to getting to see a bunch of Avengers moves in action, we also get some scary synchronized moments like Natasha and Taskmaster flipping up from the ground in perfect unison. In the Budapest safe house, we get another callback to Natasha and Clint's time there when Natasha notes the damage to the walls was from arrows rather than bullets. And while Taskmaster chases our heroes in a tank in a Terminator 2 Judgment Day inspired sequence, we see the number 409 on it, which could reference Black Widow Deadly Origin. It was released on November 4th, 2009. It's a story that similarly explores Black Widow's past, involving everything from a top-secret protocol, to nanites controlling people, to Clint Barton, to a secret base in outer space. It's all connected. Now, Natasha and Yelena finally escape by hiding out in the self-same subway where Natasha and Clint laid low during their botched mission in Budapest. We can see that they passed the time by playing tic-tac-toe, hangman, and even drawing little Hawkeye arrows. We also get a vivid memory of Natasha making that decision to pull the trigger and use Dreykov's daughter as bait to lead them to their target. And this scene also includes a subtle Jeremy Renner cameo on the radio, too.
We need confirmation Dreykov's in the building.
In the gas station, we get perhaps my favorite and one of the funniest runners in the entire film, Yelena calling Natasha a poser and making fun of her signature superhero landing.
It's a fighting pose. You're a total poser.
I'm not a poser.
And while Deadpool has mocked these things in the past, Yelena really takes her sister to task here for such a silly move that's been a key part of her character since Iron Man 2. Later, though, we see Natasha, Melina, and Yelena all doing this move, but Yelena still remains deeply skeptical. In fact, she hates it.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
We also get a nice runner about Yelena's new vest, which has enough pockets to make Rob Liefeld cry tears of joy. She later gifts it to Natasha, which she proceeds to rock in Avengers Infinity War, thereby closing the biggest plot hole in the MCU. Where did Natasha get that sweet-ass vest from? Her sister.
It does have a lot of pockets.
Very handy pockets, yeah.
During the prison escape scene, Natasha and Yelena rock White Widow suits, which are straight out of the Black Widow Deadly Origins comic. We see that Alexei is being held in the 7th Circle prison. The 7th Circle of Hell was reserved for those who committed acts of violence and brutality, which, as we've seen from Alexei's arm wrestling technique, is a fitting punishment. Now, speaking of Alexei, we get another callback to the Read in My Ledger line from Avengers when Alexei tells his daughters that their ledgers must be gushing. While he intends this to be a compliment, as always, he fails to read the room, which is exactly why they don't tell him about the earpiece later in the film.
What?
No, she can't hear you.
You don't have earpiece.
Why not?
While Alexei lies about fighting Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the pair actually did tussle in Avengers number 44. Captain America beats Alexei to a pulp until another character electrocutes Cap, and Alexei, furious at this dishonorable interference, helps Cap to escape and seemingly sacrifices himself to save the day. So, not such a bad guy after all.
Did he talk to you about me? You know, trading more stories.
Who? What are you talking about?
Captain America.
In Melina's secret armory in her house, we see what might be a subtle nod to her Iron Maiden costume from the comics. Those face-changing nanomasks or the photostatic veils in their unaltered form, they look very similar to the mask that Iron Maiden used to wear. And speaking of those masks, we get a nice callback to the photostatic veil trick that Natasha used on Alexander Pierce back in Captain America the Winter Soldier. And more recently, we saw Sharon Carter use it in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well. So wherever Bucky goes, there are weird masks to follow. Now, the Red Room itself may also have an unexpected endgame connection as well. In the Deadly Origin comic, the high-altitude helicarrier base is run by Ivan Petrovich, Natasha's father figure, who ultimately gives her over to the Red Room program before becoming an evil cyborg because comics. In Endgame, though, Red Skull calls Natasha daughter of Ivan when she appears on Vormir, and that could be a reference to Petrovich. So maybe he's just indicating that she's Russian, but it does kind of feel too neat and tidy to pass up. We also get another nice callback to Avengers when Natasha's talking circles around Dreykov. Much like she makes Loki think that he's getting to her by getting under her skin, she plays Dreykov like a fiddle before concluding with, "Thank you for your cooperation."
Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you for your cooperation.
And speaking of Avengers, as Natasha takes off in her Quinjet, we're treated to the Alan Silvestri Avengers theme in the background, indicating to us as viewers that she is on her way to rejoin Earth's mightiest heroes at long last. And thank you for your cooperation in watching everything that we spotted in Black Widow. And while we won't be seeing Scarlett Johansson suiting up as Black Widow again anytime soon, we haven't seen the last of other characters like Yelena Belova. And for more on that and even more Marvel deep dives about Black Widow and the future of the MCU, we've got you covered over on Nerdist.com. But in the meantime, folks, tell us, what did you think about Black Widow? Did you spot anything that we missed? Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.